The Supreme Court just gave President Biden a delayed Christmas present, saving him from a total catastrophe at the southern border. The justices ruling that the Trump-era Title 42 is here to stay. For now, that means Border Patrol can immediately expel migrants back to Mexico as they await asylum hearings. But it's not over yet. The justices will hear the case next year and make a final determination by June, when we get another crush of people trying to live the American dream. That comes as Democrats slam Texas Governor Greg Abbott for sending 3 busloads of migrants to border czarina Kamala Harris's D.C. home on Christmas Eve. What a present. The White House scolding Abbott and accusing him of, quote, abandoning children on the side of the road in below freezing temperatures on Christmas Eve without coordinating with any federal or local authorities. This was a cruel, dangerous, and shameful stunt, end quote. What the White House failed to mention is that resources in Texas have been stretched very thin. Crowded El Paso shelters have forced illegal immigrants to sleep on the streets, where temperatures there dipped below freezing at night. Border agents spent Christmas weekend grappling with the chaos, confronting more than 16,000 migrants in just 48 hours. Tyrus, it seems like it's pretty bad everywhere in the country. The White House is saying that there's a lack of coordination, yet they're not. But they're not coordinating anything with these desperate governors who need solutions.
I think sometimes you just got to tell it like it is. When we had the healthcare situation, the Republicans never really had a plan. They just wanted to end Obamacare, right? And when it came down to it, no, I just got to call it like I see it, because they really wanted to say, like, we want everyone to pay their own way, but they won't say it. This is the same exact thing with Democrats. They don't have a plan for the border because I basically get the feeling that they like an open border. So instead of coming up with a new plan, they just said, oh, yeah, we got something coming. Oh, it's a huge thing. It's going to be there, but it's not there. And then lo and behold, the Supreme Court bails them out, and they get reprieve to talk about, again, their big plan that they're not ever going to actually enact. So I think it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We got to call it on both sides. Republicans did it with health care, and the Democrats are doing it with border control.
Yeah, but also, okay, I will let you respond to that, because Democrats have been in power for 2 solid years now, and what have they done with that power?
Yeah, I just can't let that misinformation stand.
Tyrus, really? Remember McCain rest his soul?
That's right. It was McCain. Yeah. We had a bill. It was going to pass. John McCain gave us a no, but it was going to be great. It was going to be huge. So don't forget that.
Big, beautiful health care.
It was big and beautiful health care. That's true. But I look at this, and I mean, the fact that the White House and Democrats are chastising Republicans or Greg Abbott for dropping migrants off outside of Kamala Harris's house. Right, it's cold there, but listen, it's not just cold in El Paso. It's cold in the desert right now. And kids are sleeping in the desert. So give me a break.
If they make it to the United States.
But not only that, I mean, the fact that this policy is basically empowering the cartels to funnel little kids into sex trafficking, into slave labor, and the fact that they're going to take the high ground and say, shame on you, Greg Abbott, for dropping people off on Kamala Harris's doorstep to draw attention to the crisis at the border, because the media won't cover it. So what else do you do but do a stunt like this to go, hey, listen, everybody, kids are being hurt, kids are freezing, not just at Kamala's, but in the desert and in Texas. Let's do something as a country. And I don't think anything happens with immigration reform until the American people demand it, and this is one way to get them to pay attention.
Well, you absolutely have to do something, and you have been in the position among the inactive, but you also did work with Democrats trying to forge legislation to solve some of these problems. The problem here, Katie, is it compounds the problem. You know, even as we read this and try and make sense of what just happened with the Supreme Court, there's a sense of, so is Title 42 still here? Is it gone? Does that mean we can rush the border? Does that mean we should go home? What does that mean for people?
Well, first on the El Paso thing, in D.C., they were dropped off and immediately picked up within 10 minutes by an NGO, which is a whole nother industry that American taxpayers are paying for, essentially helping the cartels finish the journey for people they've been trafficking who have paid. But in terms of Title 42, the reason there was the stay and why the Supreme Court's going to listen to the case on the merits in the spring is because the states are arguing that it has to stay in place because they're bearing the burden of Title 42 being lifted. Now, the White House was arguing to have it lifted. They were arguing to have this influx of even more people that we're seeing. So it's still a catastrophe, and the numbers are going to continue to come until asylum reform is put into place. And Republicans have offered legislation on making sure that the bar for asylum is not just simply saying, I fear for my life, and therefore I get to get a court date. Sometimes you don't get a court date and taken on a bus or on a plane, wherever you want, by the federal government. And so in terms of Title 42, though, it is a pandemic era policy. It is actually an inappropriate policy. So Neil Gorsuch wrote in the dissent that they are not policymakers. This is not their role. And actually, it is the role of the president of the United States, who has a lot that he can do to stop this. President Trump did it. We saw it work. And then Congress does also have a role here. And so Title 42, I guess it's a good thing it's staying because the numbers would be absolutely out of control. But it's an inappropriate policy, and the federal government should be focused on sovereignty and national security, not using an outdated pandemic policy to solve a problem that the president doesn't want to.
And also
work
not
on.
just assuming that cities like El Paso can absorb this many people without more judges and, you know, more federal law enforcement to help process people and keep people safe. So
Housing, I mean, they have some big tent that's down there, as if you're going to put hundreds of thousands
But
of
isn't
people
that
in
the
a big
problem?
tent.
Like, they just keep building processing centers instead of stopping people
And
from
it
having to be
also,
processed.
for people who live there, it's completely changed the culture and their hometowns, right? I mean, we all live in places that are not on the border. I know, Katie, you obviously have family in Arizona, but what if they just change the complete makeup of our cities, right? Because we happen to live in X place. And there need to be federal dollars. We just saw a $1.7 trillion bill go through. Eric Adams is asking for $1 billion. Lori Lightfoot is asking for money. D.C. mayor, you owe it, especially if it is part of the Democratic Party credo that we run sanctuary cities and that we treat people as equals, to give those mayors those dollars to make sure that you can find housing for them. There's still empty hotels, things left over from the pandemic, where we can get people inside.
But without securing the borders, to say, listen,
I'm not
keep them
disagreeing
wide,
with that.
we
I'm saying
can't
right
afford to do both. We can't afford to
We
have.
can.
You actually can't afford a welfare state and an open border. It is mathematically impossible to support both.
I wasn't saying to fix what's going on right now in the cities that the solution is that we have to have an open border. I do think that this bipartisan bill from Senator Sinema and Senator Tillis is a big step in the right direction. I know there are a lot of Republicans who think that it's just mass amnesty, and they're concerned that it won't be enough for a physical structure versus drone technology or whatever it is. But we need a bipartisan solution, and we really need it fast. This is just heartbreaking, and I'm so overwhelmed by the fact that these migrants, who I believe these stunts are repulsive, though they do end up in churches and taken in by good people.
The Biden administration was doing the same thing.
They're not dumping them on the vice president's door on Christmas Eve to get news coverage.
They were going all over different airports all over New York and New England. The Biden administration was doing that. That was not Greg Abbott. That was not Ron DeSantis. So it's okay when your guy does it. When someone else does it who has an R after their name, it's wrong. The whole thing, I wish we could all just agree, the whole thing is wrong, it's immoral, it's dangerous, and shame on everyone in power.
It is.
Especially Abbott for 3 buses when the lucky number 6. Everyone knows it's 6 buses, never 3. Odd numbers are
That's
never
when the
good.
vice president would have
6.
taken notice.
Yeah. Well,
Borders are in.
everyone going on a free trip to the moon.
Cackling pantsuit.